Hey everybody, I hope you're doing well. This isn't exactly an update on the budget as such, but I wanted to talk a little bit about sinking funds today, and it just seemed easier to do it in like a separate video. Is my video a little bit crooked? It looks a little bit crooked. I feel like I potentially made that worse, but never mind, I'll stop messing with it. So I've had a pretty interesting set of feelings around some of the financial decisions I've made this month. So I just thought I'd go through them with you because it threw up some things that I wasn't really expecting. So a little bit of history on why I do sinking funds. For those of you who don't use that terminology, sinking funds are just essentially like savings envelopes, except I don't work in cash. So it's an expense you know is coming that you want to save for month by month in order to meet that responsibility when it comes. Now, a couple of years ago, when I was just finishing off paying off my credit card, because my initial debt was about £10,000, 10,300-ish. Most of it was on a credit card. And what I really wanted to focus on was, why do I keep spending on this card and how do I stop myself? Because I hadn't gotten as far as I did when I finally repaid it a couple of years ago, but I had run up that card to about half full before and I had paid it off. So it was quite important for me to address that behavior. What I realized is when I was looking at my spending, it was me making a decision of I want X and then thinking, well, I can just buy it now and I'll pay it off later. And that would come down to flights. Often I would just put tickets on my credit card because that would also give you a bit more protection if you ended up having to cancel tickets. And I'm actually really glad I did, because a while ago I had like a 7 or 8 month fight with lastminute.com right as COVID was starting. I ended up getting a refund, but I'm glad I had the credit card to do it through. So I recognized that one of the things I needed to do to be able to avoid that behavior in the future was to set myself up so that I had money available for things that I understood were going to come. Be that a bill, be that a plan, be that something I wanted to buy. Now, you can't plan for everything. That's why I have the emergency fund, but there are things that you can plan for. So when I first started focusing on savings instead of debt repayment, my two major focuses were setting up an emergency fund and then being able to set up these savings envelopes so that I would have access to cash and wouldn't need to run up the card again. Another thing I did with this was to open up a few different bank accounts, because I do find something I do very strongly is compartmentalize. And so what I wanted to see, because I made this mistake before, was any money that was in the account that I transfer my money into, anything that was left there was just money. It wasn't assigned for anything. I wasn't going to accidentally spend something that should be elsewhere. So I set up my accounts, and I have my primary account that I transfer my money into. I have a second account where I would transfer money to cover any outgoings in, not here, but in the UK. Mainly that was for things like subscriptions, because I used to have more subscriptions than I have now. And I have a third bank account for any savings, that like shorter to medium term savings that I want, so that I know that everything is covered if I send X amount that month. That's why I have the spreadsheet that I do all my savings on. And then that means I essentially have a slush fund in my primary account that once all of those things are accounted for, anything extra I have is just there. And if I need a little extra cash at any point, it's there as a buffer. This happens quite frequently because I do have to go through the exchange rate, so I never know exactly how much I'm receiving. And that's also the account that I get paid my YouTube money into. Oh, the call to prayer has started, so please excuse me if you hear it. So that was all very positive, and it helped a lot, because once I've got money assigned to a purpose, I no longer think of it as money. So I'm not sitting there going, oh, this looks nice, I can impulse buy this because I've got the money to do it. So separating money out and saying, no, this is for this purpose, really helped with those impulses to go, oh, let's just do something nice. It's that not entirely untrue but very dangerous thought of, I work hard, let's have nice things. which everybody deserves but isn't always helpful for your financial plans. So one of the things about how my work schedule is laid out is the fact that because I teach, I have summers off. And that often means that the sinking funds I have tend to be utilized during the summer. So it's a very feast-famine approach to spending, because in the summer I've got more time to do appointments, I've got more time to get used to any new hardware I've got the time to travel. So anything I'm going to be spending is frequently in larger amounts spent during this period of the year. Now, I knew and I planned for certain expenses this summer, and when I was looking at my plans for the year, I did actually make the conscious choice to say, I'm not going to travel this year because I want my money to go to other places. And I ended up redistributing some of that money to those places. And what this basically means is that I've spent, not in an unplanned way, not in an impulsive way, but I've spent a lot of money this month, and it's sort of thrown up some emotions. Now, let me show you what I mean, and I'll show you what I've spent or what I'm planning to spend in the next few weeks. So the main two culprits here have been my medical fund and have been my large purchases fund. I had a starting balance of $1,400 in the medical because I knew I was planning on having some dental work done and I didn't know how much that was going to cost. And I had a starting balance of $2,150 in my large purchases fund because I knew at some point, and I didn't know when, that I was going to need to upgrade my computer because it was just getting on in life. And I probably at some point will need to upgrade my phone, although I got a new phone a few years ago and I'm hoping to keep it a bit longer. Now, when I initially made that plan, I thought that I would get the dental work done this summer, but I wouldn't end up buying a new computer until probably next year because I thought the computer that I actually ended up purchasing wasn't going to be out until next year, but then it ended up being this year. So let's have a little look at what I've spent over the last couple of weeks, shall we? My medical, as I say, had a starting balance of $1,400. The dentist stuff, basically, I've had a root canal. I'm kind of bruised under here, it hurts. But I've had a root canal, and then we're going to whiten my teeth probably. I've got an appointment next Thursday. I think we're doing that then. And then once we've whitened the teeth and we can see what color they are and how they've recovered from that, the permanent crown that's going to go on the root canal is going to be matched to the color of my teeth. Now, I did not know exactly what that would cost. I had a rough idea. When I went to the dentist, they actually ended up charging me a little less for the root canal. They charged me 100 real instead of 120, which ends up being, multiple currencies, ends up being about £220 for the root canal. I'll try to remember to put the currency exchanges somewhere on the screen so this makes a bit more sense for you, okay? Right now, it looks like the other stages, that's the tooth whitening and then the crown, those would be separate stages, are going to probably cost about 120 to 130 for each stage, which translates as about £250 per session. So that was a planned expense, and I'm not too bothered by that expense. I knew it was going to cost a certain amount of money. I don't think the price is that bad for having it done privately, and they do a good job. Now, there were a couple of things I've also done in medical that I wasn't expecting to do. We've already talked about the tooth surgery I had. So I ended up taking some money before this out of my medical fund because I ended up having to have an impacted molar from the back surgically removed. I won't give any more details. I know it grosses some people out. But I had to pay for that, but that came before the $1,400. So I'd already started spending the medical fund. I then also did something I wasn't expecting, and you can see a little through the makeup and a little you can't, but I've got basically an entire constellation running down my face right now, where I had these little bumps that I thought were acne scars that were actually something to do with the pores on my skin that were being raised up, and they looked a bit like scars, but it meant that I went to a dermatologist clinic, which I wasn't necessarily planning to do this summer. I just kind of had in my mind, and I ended up having a conversation with a friend who recommended a clinic and then going for it. But I had those things removed. I've got an appointment next week to check on them. And that cost about £230. So the £500 for the crown and the whitening I haven't paid yet, but I've got waiting. And currently I've got about £450 left in that sinking fund. Now you can see on there as well, when I was there, the doctor was saying, we were talking about my skin type, and I did a skincare video right before this one, feel free to go and see it. But we were talking about maybe doing a series of salicylic acid peels, which was not something I was planning to have done, but I was interested in and they mentioned. But looking at the price is going to be about 270 rial. So I cannot cover it with my sinking fund right now. And I've made the decision, because I'm trying to be responsible and not give in to my emotions, which we'll talk about after I've gone through the numbers, that I'm probably just going to wait. I'm going to build this sinking fund up again, and I might go to get that done maybe over the winter holiday, because the sun won't be as intense, and it'll give me a little bit more time to save money. Now, in my large purchases fund, I'm actually looking right now at my Surface Pro 11. I was on a Surface Pro 6. It was struggling a little bit with Windows 11s. You could just feel it huffing and puffing a little bit. And it had frozen a couple of times when I was trying to export videos. So I was like, I mean, it did its time. I'd had it for a solid maybe 6 years. I can't remember exactly how long, but that kind of timeline. Like, it had done its job and it had done it well. But it was time to just, be kind to it and maybe put it out to pasture a little bit. So I ended up buying a Surface Pro 11 and upgrading it. Now, fortunately, because I sent that from the UK, I actually got the tax taken off that, which was 20%. But then with import tax and postage, I ended up paying $16.16 for it, which was still a solid £500 less than it would have been if I had bought the imported one from here. So I still saved a reasonable amount of money, and there's a good chance I'm going to get probably about £50 back, because I got the notice from the customs saying this is how much import tax you paid, and Amazon do this thing where they charge you for import tax and then you get refunded if you pay less, but you don't get charged if you pay more. I paid more. I paid about £120 import tax, but I ended up getting charged about £75. You don't really need this level of detail, but here we are. I also bought some computer accessories. I bought a new keyboard, because my old keyboard was a little bit worn and it wouldn't have fit this computer. And I got like a Surface pen with it as well. And I also, a little side rant about subscription-based models. I bought a personal Office license for 2021, the 2021 version of Office, for £109 rounded up. Because, guys, I hate subscription models so much. I come from the era of you buy the program, you own the program. And I remember I was so angry with Wondershare Filmora is the video editing software I use. And when I bought it, I bought a lifetime license. And when they changed to a subscription model, they tried to tell everybody who had the lifetime license, no, you have to pay, but here's a reduced amount. And we were like, no, friend, no. And in the end, I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently enough people revolted that they upgraded us to the new system for free. But I hate subscription models. I think if I buy software, I want to use software, and I'm okay with using it for as long as I have it. I'm okay with support stopping for it after a certain amount of time, but I bought that product. I don't like the idea of renting it for a certain amount of time. Now, there are some programs that I don't mind doing that with, like, for example, streaming services, movie streaming services. It's just like how we used to go rent videos. I feel so old as I'm saying this. I'm 41. I feel so old saying this. But I can accept it there, but I have real problems with it when it comes to software for whatever reason. So I had originally on my old computer the 2013 version of Office, and I had been deregistering it and reinstalling it onto every computer I had every time I changed computer or wanted to use it, because I just refused to pay for the subscription, because the subscription right now is about £55 a year. So within 2 years, you are paying the same amount. But I used that copy for nearly 11 years. Like, I am not paying a yearly amount, screw that. But 2013 is obviously not optimized for Windows 11. I was already paying out so much money to upgrade my machine, to start fresh, to do it very well. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to bite the bullet. I'm going to upgrade my Windows Office suite to better reflect the abilities of my computer. So I also bought that. That means I've got £265 left in that sinking fund. And I've actually got other things I want to buy. Like, I have been wanting to buy a Ninja Creamy for so long, just not pulling the trigger. And that's really, sorry, this was a really long explanation. That's really the emotions I'm sort of struggling right now with, because spending money for me, I'm a really good saver, but I'm also a really good spender. And it's very feast or famine. And something I've noticed when it comes to the savings envelopes, the sinking funds, whatever you want to call them, I hoard my sinking funds like a dragon with a golden egg. I love building them, and especially once I built them, because building them, even though I knew it wasn't a waste of time, I was so aware of the opportunity cost of not investing that money, and knowing what I knew about how I'd run up my credit card and how I think about money, I just had to take a breath and be like, no, this is for the consistency of your future, so that you've got this money when you need it. But I treated them in a lot of ways like emergency funds. With these bigger funds, the smaller ones, I don't have as much problem spending, I feel like. I'm not sure why that is. But I'm looking at these reduced amounts, and even though this is exactly what it was for, it was to give me time to save so that I could have these lovely shiny new things when I needed or wanted them without putting myself into debt. I'm looking at the idea of building these funds again, and there's part of me that feels really disappointed. And I don't know why, because I fulfilled exactly the purpose this had. I did what I was supposed to do with this. And yet the thought of having to build that money up again feels a little bit like failure. And it shouldn't. Like, it was money that I didn't put onto my credit card that fulfilled a need that I identified and planned for. This is exactly the behavior I wanted to see in my future self, to be more responsible with my wants. But I'm not feeling that way. I'm really struggling with it, and I'm not sure why. And it was like the face peels I wanted, I was really tempted, because this is another thing it's bringing up. It's that idea of, and if you don't eat like this, you may not understand this impulse either. But again, the idea of feast and famine. When you break a diet and you think, oh, well, I've broken the diet now, I may as well scrap this day and just have whatever I want and get back onto it tomorrow. The impulse to spend has just been so much stronger. And it's possibly because of this feeling, because you've got this mixture of, oh, it's too late, you've spent this, versus, oh, well, you're fine because it was for that reason, and the justifications you do in your head. Because when I went in to the skincare clinic, to the dermatologist, I wasn't originally intending to do that. It was a reasonable amount. I had it in my medical fund. I wanted to do it. I just didn't have a plan to do it this summer. So it feels like an extra. And that has kind of broken the seal on the spending. And then I was like, oh, I'll get the skin thing done as well. I had no plan to do that. I think it would be nice. I can make a plan to do that. That's why the fund's there. But the impulse was to do it now. And luckily, I kind of reined myself back and was like, I would have to take the last of the money from my large purchases. I'd have to put it into medical. I'd have to move things around. And then I really would be starting from zero. And that feels worse than how good getting it done would feel, I think. Like, I can be more sensible with that. But I wasn't expecting kind of this roller coaster of feelings that comes with it. I was expecting it to be a really positive thing, and it has been a really positive thing. I made good choices with what I was doing, but I need to work on this idea that sinking funds and emergency funds seem to take up the same space in my head, even though I know they fulfill different purposes. Because the emergency fund, essentially, once it's full, I do hoard it like a dragon. It's there for emergencies and for no other reason. And I like the feeling of security that gives me. And I guess really I had been thinking of these funds, even as I was saying the right things, kind of as a, well, if I have to, I can break into these. Because I've had times where, for example, I have a birthday gift fund and it's small and I don't really mind spending it. But there have been times when, instead of breaking into that fund, I've used the slush in the bottom of my bank account, like the extra money that's just there, just in case, because I have a minimum amount I want to keep my sinking funds at, and breaking into them means making it up, and maybe that's what's causing it. But it was quite an interesting rabbit hole it sent my brain down. And I'm not sure if everyone feels like this. Please let me know if you do. But I've got to maybe balance this a little bit more, because there is also, and I've noticed this more recently as well, a certain amount of, I guess the word is guilt with it, even though guilt might be too strong a word perhaps. Basically, I've got to look again, I think, at the balance of what I'm doing for myself now and what I'm doing for myself in the future. Because, just as a little background, if you don't watch my videos very much, I worked abroad a lot of my life. So in the UK, you have taxes, a tax called national insurance that goes towards government services. And one of the things it funds is your government pension, your state pension. And the rule is basically that in order to get full state pension, you have to pay 35 years to get the full one. Between 10 and 35 years is a sliding scale. I'm aiming to fill my requirements for the state pension. I think I've got another 11 years to go into it, maybe 12. But I should be finished with it by the time I'm like 54-ish. So that's assuming it stays that way, because you're not guaranteed that pension because legislation might change, but it would be quite hard to take it away from people. But that's a whole separate thing. You also have something called the workplace pension, which is when your employer will put a percentage of your wage into the workplace pension. And I think the law is they have to match it by a minimum of 3%, but some offer better matches. Now, the thing is, even though I have taught for most of my life, and generally speaking, there are good benefits in that way, I have always been a teacher abroad, and so I've never built up a workplace pension. And one of the things I started looking at when I was like, what do I need for the future, was one, sorting out my national insurance to make sure that I was covered there, but two, building up a private pension, because I never built up a workplace one. So I was starting from really behind, and I'm very aware of that. But I don't think I'm very good at the balance of saying, all right, in order to meet my requirements for when I retire, I need to do X, but I'm finding it difficult to balance that with the present. You don't want to live entirely for the future because you'll waste your present. And I've got a really good savings rate. I'm at about, I think I worked it out for my last one at being about 85%. And maybe part of it is cost of living. Like I'm pretty well insulated from it here because I don't pay rent and the school provides a stipend for utilities. But when I built my budget, the budget I have now, it was designed to include little luxuries, and that has been stretched a little bit as time has gone on. So I think what I might have to do is, when I start looking at my goals for 2025, which is something I do at the end of every year before the year starts, I need to figure out at what point do I feel secure enough that I can do more for myself in the present, and what that looks like and what those numbers look like, because I don't want to live only for the future. You might never get to the future. But I think it's really dangerous to say today is more important when I know that I started this behind and I have a lot of ground to make up. And part of that could just be burnout, because I've been on this financial goal for quite a while. I spent just over a year, paying off the card. I spent most of last year building up the sinking funds and getting myself into a better position with the national insurance and things. And this year has been really focused on building up my retirement and building up a fund for eventually for me to buy a house and like the money pots I'm going to need later. So I need to sit down with the numbers. I need to figure out what my goals are with that, what I'm hoping to achieve probably in the next year or two, and where that will leave me. Because I think I think I shouldn't make large changes in how much I'm putting towards the future right away, because I think there are amounts, when I look into it, I'll figure out what those amounts are, but there are amounts I'd like to hit. So for example, at 100,000, your money starts to really be able to work more for you. So I'd like to build up my savings in different ways to that level if I could. So I've got to really figure out, how long will that take? What will it take to do? Are there ways that I can bring in other income to maybe allow me to live a bit more in the present? And what can I do to sort of dissuade the guilt attached to that? Because it feels sometimes like when I get extra money, I'm getting a bonus, for example, in September, and I will put that into my future goals. And that's fine. I always intended to do that. But it might be in the future that I say, okay, maybe I'll keep my bonus and do something fun with it. But then there's a certain amount of guilt that comes with that because I'm not achieving the goal I set out for myself. It's a weird space to be in, and I think I need to do more thought in how I'm balancing those wants, you know? I've rambled a lot. This is at 32 minutes. I'll try and edit it down. But anyway, I'm kind of in a little bit of a messy place there. I'm going to just keep a hold on it. I don't want this to become a spending spree just because I'm like, well, I've broken the seal now. Let's just spend all the money because I have it. Because I do have that impulse in my brain. So you sometimes have to think, like, at what point am I justifying what I want to do with these reasons? And at what point are the reasons true? And that's a bit of a dangerous game to play, and I'm just trying to navigate it. So anyway, feel free to put your thoughts below. I'm not entirely sure what I'm putting to you right now, or like what I'm asking you exactly. But, you know, word vomit on the screen, there we go. That's where my thoughts are right now, and that's sort of what I'm focusing on. So I'll see you for the beginning of month budget in probably 10, 11 days. I think I decided I was going to start the official month for the 14th, even though I've technically been paid for everything, because then I can move on to my next budget. But I would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your feelings, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.